the FOMO, welcome to the review of what you've all been waiting for, which is possibly two of the best mini LED TVs on sale today, especially for under $2,000. So we have the Hisense U8K, which has around 1,000 dimming zones, let's say just over 1,000. The TCL QM8, similarly, just over 1,000 dimming zones. And these are the flagship TVs from Hisense and TCL, and they were designed to beat the Sony X93L, which is really last year's X95K, and definitely designed to match or beat the Samsung QN95C. Now, the question is, how does the U8K compare to the QM8? And that's why we're here, right? Oh, look at this. Special guest, Caleb. Hey, Caleb, how are you doing, man? Oh, okay, so Caleb's reminding me, be sure
But first, let me introduce today's sponsor, U8Keys. Yep, you just finished your big old PC Windows build, you have the best of the best, and sadly, you have less than $20 to your name. U8Keys to the rescue. Use my code SF20 and immediate discount. Let's quickly go through the activation process after you've purchased Windows 10 on U8Keys. Go to your U8Keys account and select My Purchased Orders. See your order. To the far right, click on the button that says View Keys Codes to see the Windows CD code. At the bottom of this order where it says Code Card, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from U8Keys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can download the Windows 10 Pro key and you're up and running. But that's not all, folks. U8Keys has keys for games too. Steam, Origin, Uplay, you name it, you got it. Check out their sites. There are discounts for all sorts of stuff. And most importantly, you want to be productive? What about Office Suite? Yep, you can download a copy of Office Professional with my code SF20 at checkout, and bam.
So Caleb's reminding me, be sure to check Filmmaker Mode in HDR. If it looks super dim, it's an error with the TV. Don't use it. So, Caleb, I noticed that when I turned it on, it was super dim, and that was because Filmmaker Mode keeps on enabling the light sensor, and I keep having to go back and disable it. So it looks like it's disabled right now. So let's start with the settings in the U8K. Make sure I disable all the crazy ambient light. So the first thing you want to do is, when you have either the U8K or the U7K, go into the general, and then go right down here to automatic light sensor, make sure that is off. It often pops on like that. Make sure it's off. You see it, the minute I turned it on, it got dim right away, which is nuts. And then I select Filmmaker Mode because that is the most accurate mode for white point. Local dimming is always on high, brightness is 100, contrast set a default, black level 0, dark detail, I think they mean shadow detail. So if you enable it, you'll notice that it slightly raises the near black just a touch, so you see more shadow detail. That's what dark detail does. So if you're watching Game of Thrones, those really dark scenes, and you want to see the detail in the deep shadow areas that are too black, turning on dark detail raises those blacks, eliminating some crushing. Dynamic tone mapping, I'm going to keep it off. Now, there will be scenes where I will turn it on and you will see what it does. Actually, on the U8K, I see the dynamic tone mapping does help it a little bit. And I'll show you where. But for now, we'll keep it off, but we'll toggle that. So keep dynamic tone mapping in mind. Color, I just leave everything standard. Color temperature, warm 1 is the most accurate color temperature. Clarity, this is when we play with YouTube TV, low bitrate content. We can then turn on smooth gradient, as you saw yesterday. So what smooth gradient does is, if you have low bitrate content and you see a lot of jaggies, a lot of macro blocking, turning smooth gradient to high fixes that. Nothing else. I do not like stutter at all. So I have judder at 3, and I found it to be okay. Some TVs, some users might want to go to 4. I think 3 is fine. Blur reduction, I leave it at 7. I really don't know what it does, but 7 so far has been good to me. And motion clearness, this is their black frame insertion. If you turn it on, it should give you better motion, but it gets a little bit darker. You see how much darker that is? It's like you could barely see the TV. And for me, though, what bothers me is not just the darkness of BFI, but also the flicker. I'm pretty sensitive to that. So I never use Clarity BFI. And so yeah, so final settings, Filmmaker mode, make sure automatic light sensor is off, brightness, everything here, brightness 100, contrast 100, black level 0, dark detail off, active contrast off. I normally only turn this on in a bright room. Dynamic tone mapping is off for now, and color, default, but color temperature warm 1 is the most accurate. All right. So just the U7K is nearly identical to the U8K with one exception. On the U7K, let's see. I always have, make sure that's off, okay. So also filmmaker mode, I always have dynamic tone mapping on. So on the U7K, leave dynamic tone mapping on. Enable it, more often than not, it looks better. If it's off, it's just not bright enough. It's actually kind of dim, and you lose a lot of specular highlight detail. But all else is very similar. And warm color temperature, warm 1. So pretty much identical to the U8K. So Q7, movie mode. So what's interesting on the QM8 and the QM7, or the Q7 and the QM8, you don't have as many modes. It's either movie or sports. Everything else is gaming, PC, and IMAX. I find to be just oversaturated. It just doesn't look good to me. So it's in movie mode. Brightness 100, color saturation 49. So this one is calibrated. That's what we have. Brightness settings. So contrast is 100, where the Hisense are at 50. Here, both the TCL's contrast will be at 100 to get you maximum accuracy. Black stretch does nothing, so dynamic tone mapping on the Q7 also must be on. Local contrast is the local dimming zone, so have that on high. And the Q7 has less than 200 dimming zones, whereas the U7K has like 384 dimming zones or so. So a bit more dimming zones, but shockingly, the Q7 performs as well, if not better, in many scenes. So in this case, TCL has done an amazing job with just over 100 dimming zones. QM8 similar to the Q7, except you need to turn dynamic tone mapping off. So this is very important. If you have dynamic tone mapping on the QM8, it's not good. I mean, they raise the midtones. Everything is just clipped. It doesn't look good at all. So leave dynamic tone mapping off. Very few instances where you'll need to turn it on. So let's see here. Contrast also 100. And local contrast, of course, on high. Color temperature on both is -5, warmest. Even though it's on its warmest setting, this is the most accurate setting. Okay, this is where already from the get-go, I'm going to have to turn on dynamic tone mapping. On the U8K, the contrast with the clouds, it's bright, but you don't see any detail, right? So what happens if I turn on dynamic tone mapping? Something that every TV is just a little bit different. Suddenly the clouds reappear. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it on for now. So the dynamic tone mapping is on the U8K, it's on the U7K, and it's on the Q7. On the QM8, dynamic tone mapping is off. So right here in this scene, it feels like the Q7 has the most detail. It does the best job of rendering the entire scene. Now remember, this is 10,000 nit content. None of these TVs can do 10,000 nit. So what they're doing is saying, look, this is what I'm capable of. I am going to bring you what I can based on my capabilities. The Q7 actually does it, I think, the best. It's not as bright as the U8K. It's not as bright as the QM8, but you're getting all the detail in this 10,000 nit content. The QM8 is bright, but you lose some of that detail. The U7K is also bright, you lose some detail, and the U8K clips is the brightest, but you're clipping the most detail. And this is, again, it's 10,000 nit content, right? So just to compare, let me show you. So the reason I did 10,000 is because, come on, it's the U8K, right? But let's go to 1,000, you guys will see. Oh, look at that. I'm going to pause right here. Look at all that glorious detail. So unlike 10,000 nit content, in 1,000 nit content, how do these TVs look? Suddenly, the U8K, to me, has the most detail now. So as you can see, a lot of people say, oh, the U8K must suck. Well, actually, You don't have 10,000 nit content out there. When you guys are streaming, it's always 1,000 nit or less. And if you're lucky on a disk, you might get 2,000 nit content. But the reality is, for streaming content, it'll probably be 1,000 at most. But let's try 2,000 and see how the U8K and the QM8 compare. So 2,000 is, we're talking stuff like Mad Max, and this is not looking good for the U8K, right? So at 2,000, the U8K, you start to lose detail again. This is something that you guys have to think about is, what are you using the U8K for? If it's streaming, if it's digital, satellite, whatever, YouTube, it's fine.